All right, why do you think a real estate agent would be in an ambulance with his client? Welcome to True Real Estate Horror Stories with Chris Bishop, Part 3.
Let me tell you a good story.
Okay.
All right.
Let's go.
We'll end with something that's a little bit humorous. When you go through training as an agent, it's important to listen, right?
Mm-hmm.
You know, when you tell your kids something, you tell your kids something to protect them and keep them safe. And sometimes they just don't care and they got to do it. And
learn by
yeah,
their own.
my father would always say, "I told you so."
Yeah.
Or "I told you not to do that," right?
Yeah.
And as you're crying, they're upset. And so there was an agent, a brand new agent. I was training this about 10 years ago. I was a new broker, and really nice guy. I mean, he really was a genuinely nice guy. And he decided he was going to do phone prospecting as his business. Very small SOI. He needed to meet people. Goes in there, kills it on the phone, making his calls. Finally meets a client, gets a listing, and he's super excited. And he's going through the process. And of course, we outline, what needs to happen and the steps for it. Yeah. And it turns out that in the course of the closing, at the close date, there needs to be a lease back because the client had too much stuff. They had animals, the whole thing. And so, of course, I said, you need to get a lease completed, or that was before we had the occupancy agreements.
I was going to say, yeah.
And I said, but you got to get something in writing, because that's the job of a real estate agent, put everything in writing. Yeah. Yeah. And he says, okay. So I get in the office the next day. He's excited about his closing. And I said, so what happened with the lease back? And he goes, oh, I got busy. We were doing this. We were trying to do the walkthrough, and I forgot to do it. And I said, that deal closed yesterday. And he says, yeah. And I said, so you now have nothing in writing saying that they have permission to be there. Your client is a trespasser in someone else's home, and it's because of you not doing that. You've got to go and rectify this issue immediately. And we need to make sure that it gets in writing.
Right, because there's no terms, so nobody knows when is he moving out.
They could call the cops and say someone's squatting in my house,
Yeah.
And they have a whole department dedicated to squatters at Metro, right? So so we go through that process, and it's about 7 o'clock at night. And he left the office at 2 to go tell this person, right? And so I'm guessing between 2 and that 6 o'clock range, he was trying to figure out how to tell the client what he needed to tell them, right? He calls me, 7 o'clock, I answer my phone. I'm like, hey man, what's going on? And I just hear sirens in the background, like loud sirens. And he goes, hey Chris, listen, I told the client and we're on the way to the hospital. And I'm like, you're what? And he goes, we're on the way to the hospital. I told my client and he had a heart attack.
Stop.
And I said, are you kidding me? And he goes, no, you can hear the sirens. And he's in the ambulance with his client. I mean, I'm trying to
sign here, please.
Yeah. And I'm like, number one, why are you in the ambulance, right? I mean, if he really did have that, why are you still there? And he goes, there was no one there with him. I had to make sure he got to the hospital. And he goes, and now I'm helping him fill out the paperwork and stuff like that. So he had like a coronary episode. So this poor agent. Now this is when your broker tells you to do something, you need to listen. So he spent the entire night at the hospital with his client. Thank God the client, it seems like it was more of a panic attack than an actual heart attack. The buyer felt so horrible that it happened that the buyer let the guy lease the property back for like 2 weeks.
Wow.
Free.
Wow.
Because
so
when
I got very lucky.
Yeah, but I think I don't know if it was luck or if it was the story that we were able to tell them that I shared with the other broker of the sound of the sirens in the background of this poor agent, going through this.
Well, I also think I'd be curious on the story or how he presented this to his client that made his client have a panic attack, because that's also probably something
right
that went down.
You just sit there and kind of wonder about how that unfolded. But the thing that I took with me is that we do this stuff for a reason in the course of our job to protect the people we care about, our clients. Right. And if you don't, they're paying you to give them that hard news. Right, and you know how it is.
To be honest with them.
Yeah, you see agents all the time that the problem they have is they can't have a conversation and share bad news.
Sure.
We don't get that luxury, right? That'd be like me being sick and the doctor not telling me what the problem is so that I know that it can be fixed or not. Right. And so again, it's a humorous horror story.
Oh, it's hilarious.
But the agent from that point on, I'm glad to say that they did do their paperwork and get it done.
Well, and it's those horror stories. I have one of myself where I've had to write a $15,000 check to a client because of a simple addendum mistake that I made, and put her in a lawsuit. And I didn't want her to. I wanted her to continue to use me. And so I said, you know what? Here you go. You can have my full commission check. And later down the road, she went did business with me again, and it was my first $1 million property,
Wow.
so it all came back.
Yep.
But I think it's those mistakes that, at least for me, they made me really, really be careful on what I'm doing, and also be 100% honest with the client.